So today I want to share some of the joys and the ways that I've been playing during this retreat on my vacation with Chenrezig. So one thing that I've practiced that I love doing that Venerable encourages, but I find so nourishing, is really sitting and imagining the Buddha looking at me with pure love, compassion, acceptance. What it would be like to have someone full of tranquility, kind of benevolence, and complete understanding and wisdom would be so powerful. And I realized, I guess when I was a baby, I had a kid, I had a scrapbook. And when I was a little infant, my mom had drawn a face of just a smiling face, just on a piece of cardboard, I think. But it helps soothe the baby when they're really little to have a smiling face sitting next to them. And I realized, I was like, oh, we've been doing this for a long, like our first image as a child, as a little baby, was seeing a smiling face at us, and how deeply soothing that is. And so I wonder if there's probably that connection with also imagining, an enlightened being looking at you in the same way of pure acceptance. And I've also thought of the Buddha as kind of looking at me like with the same joy of a parent watching their child take their first steps, like that joy of watching the kid learn how to walk, with that kind of complete joy and that confidence in knowing that that child can learn to walk. I think that's the key thing, is knowing the Buddha's looking at us, knowing that we can take these steps along the path, and how beautiful and important that is, and how much joy the Buddhas are having at watching us take these little baby steps. But the Buddhas are also looking at us as we throw little temper tantrums and realize that our minds are totally under the control of afflictions and karma sometimes. But they're still looking at us with complete acceptance and understanding. I think this practice also is helpful because it's kind of like the mirror effect, that if the Buddha can see me in that way, then I can learn to see myself in that way also. And that's very powerful. And then the more I can learn to see myself in that way, I can also learn to see others in that way as well. So it's a very powerful practice. Let's see, yeah, another thing that I think it's so soothing looking at the Buddha, because it's kind of like how people like to have pets as their companions, is that the pets aren't talking back or giving judgment or criticism. They're just looking at you with simple affection and adoration and wanting to be cared for. And the Buddha doesn't need anything from us, but they're also just looking at us without any judgment or needing anything. But then that's also why we need other people, is so that we can actually develop those qualities to be like a Buddha. Because if we were only around our pets and the Buddhas, then we wouldn't really grow nearly as much. Another practice I've been playing with is the mandala offering, which just has lots of endless opportunities for creativity, and really imagining what it would be like to be in a Buddha land. And I like to think of everybody in that Buddha land practicing nonviolent communication and being able to express themselves and not having blaming or judging minds, but actually connecting with empathy and respect. Everybody living in harmony and taking delight in offering to the Buddhas. Especially lately, I've been imagining all the billionaires and world leaders in the world offering food, shelter, everything that every being needs, and working together in harmony and taking delight in helping people and making those offerings to the Buddhas. And then finally, the part of the visualization of imagining the light coming in from Chenrezig, I've been playing with imagining all sentient beings being free from suffering and having their happiness in the form of the 9 needs. There's 9 certain needs that Venerable Jigme talked about kind of before we went into retreat. Universal needs that all humans have from nonviolent communication. And I want to unpack these a little bit. I think Marshall Rosenberg was a bodhisattva as far as his wisdom and really being able to recognize really understanding people and recognizing what they really need. And really seeing that all humans, it's so helpful to remember that all humans have these same basic needs, and really all of our actions are driven by these needs. Sometimes they're often in a confused way, but when you really look down to it, you can link it to one of these needs that people are trying to be met. And I think this is also kind of a form of Tonglen in really connecting with feeling what it's, connecting with knowing what it feels like to not have these needs be met. And then also from having my own personal experience in facing that and having the courage to really acknowledge that and to sit with it and not to avoid those uncomfortable feelings. But then on the flip side, to imagine having the joy of having those needs be met. And so meeting each of these needs is a form of joy in having them be satisfied, joy and contentment. So these needs are, the first one is sustenance, which is kind of basic human needs of food, shelter, and medicine. And this is, yeah, everybody needs this to survive. And I've been really, I don't know, I have a karmic connection with Africa, I think. So I've been really thinking about the Sudanese people and what it would be like to be starving to death. For at least 2 years now, they've had this war going on, and 25 million people are suffering from food insecurity. And I did read one little story, the only little story of news I've read this retreat was about a woman who's been in this refugee camp for 2 years. And she said they're so hungry, they walk 4 hours a day to a forest to pick some leaves that are so bitter they have to cook them and add some spices to make them digestible. But those little leaves are what they're barely surviving on. She was saying she doesn't really know whether she's dead or alive. And so it's hard, it's impossible to imagine, but I think it's also very helpful to think of what people are experiencing. And then on the flip side, imagining giving them a buffet of food, of the joy that they would have. I mean, people in other experiences in war situations, the relief that they would feel of finally having security and safety and medicine. And the second point, the second need that everybody has is to feel safety and to have that feeling of protection and to not have fear. And how, I mean, it's beautiful to feel that feeling, but then also to feel what it would feel like to have that need be met, to not have fear, to feel completely safe. And then the third one is empathy, and the feeling of really feeling understood and respected. That feeling of being seen and heard is something everybody needs and is a valid need. And then the next one is love, which is really kind of that feeling of, I connect with it as feeling cared for and having that contentment and joy and acknowledging that, people care for you, that you're not alone, which leads, all of these kind of, I feel like, lead into each other. So the fifth one is community, and everybody has the need for a sense of belonging and connection. And I also think of kind of companionship of, I think of people in the world who are alone and feeling isolated, and especially kind of elderly people who don't have that connection and that sense of community. And then having the joy of actually being with others and being able to share in the experience of life with others, and how much joy we all get from that. The sixth one is autonomy, which is good to recognize that everybody has this need and that feeling of freedom, and I've been kind of naming it having a choice and a voice, of feeling safe in speaking up for your needs and being able to make choices about your own life. And then the seventh one is to have meaning and purpose in life. And once I learned this one, it really resonated, of like, wow, so much of my life I was just kind of a ski bum floating around playing, but I was searching for that meaning in life and how important it is to have that real direction. And I've kind of expanded on it to thinking of having not just meaning and purpose of, I want to be rock star or something, but having a virtuous and beneficial meaning and purpose in life, which means thinking beyond just helping myself and thinking of others, which is so much more fulfilling. And the joy from that is so much bigger and better than just being focused on the self. And I think once all these needs are met, then we get to the eighth one, which is rest and recreation and play. And then when you have all those other needs met, then you can have kind of a sense of ease and contentment, which I think then leads into the ninth one, which is creativity. And then when we have those other needs met, then kind of that natural creativity just flows and expresses different forms of joy in wanting to find creative ways in having that meaning and benefit of others and purpose in life. And so in looking at these different needs, I've been seeing, I mean, of course, how deeply interconnected we are, how all of these needs, we can't have these needs met by ourselves if we live isolated, but how all of them are so, they show how interconnected we are and how much we depend on other people. And also when I recognize that when my needs are being met, I'm much more effective at helping other people and also wanting their needs to be met as well. And the more I'm aware of my needs and feeling and what it feels like to not have those needs be met, then I am also wanting to recognize those in others and help them have their needs be met as well. So it's definitely a interplay of recognizing my own needs and then wanting to help others, because then I can understand much more deeply of what it feels like to not have them be met, and then also to know what it feels like to have them be met. And another connection with these is that really recognizing that a heart of bodhicitta really meets all of these needs, maybe except the sustenance and the food part, but as Milarepa showed us, that we don't really need that much even if you have that bodhicitta. But really recognizing that it's through this interconnection and having an open, loving heart from my side that allows those needs to be met. And it's a way of getting out of that isolated, separate view, which keeps those needs from being met. And it's been really powerful just imagining having those needs be met, just sitting on the cushion, imagining those helps to bring a sense of connection and contentment and fulfillment, which opens my mind more to being in connection with imagining what it would be like to have those qualities like Chenrezig, to not be lacking anything and to feel complete confidence, wisdom, and compassion. And imagining me seeing the world through the eyes of benevolence and understanding, and wishing everybody else could experience the same thing. So I wish you joy in exploring and getting familiar with these needs, and knowing that everybody can work on them and connect with them and play with them in a way that we can work towards meeting our needs and living more in peace and harmony in the really greatest way possible, and ultimately becoming a Buddha of ourselves.